All right, welcome to Return to the Father. I'm sorry. Again, started yesterday with reading the first 3 chapters on book 1 in the Imitation of Christ. So we will do chapters 4, 5, and 6 today. This is just me, lay Catholic, reading through the Imitation of Christ, sharing some insights, some things that really stuck out to me. As I found it a really impactful book, and just trying to deepen my own faith and understanding, and wanted to share it as well. So, chapter 4 of book 1 is Prudence in Action. Now, this is one, let me just preface by saying, the first line or two is something that I have personally struggled with impulse and worried about what other people thought and suggestions, and not considering all the details or considering God's will for the situation. So here we go. Prudence in action. Do not yield to every impulse and suggestion, but consider things carefully and patiently in the light of God's will. For very often, sad to say, we are so weak that we believe and speak evil of others rather than good. Perfect men, however, do not readily believe every talebearer, because they know that human frailty is prone to evil and is likely to appear in speech. Falling into that many, many times, talking about people, and sometimes would, in my mind, I would justify it as, well, I wouldn't say anything that I wouldn't say to them directly. But then by the same token, while I believe that, I also haven't put it to the test. So, for myself, I definitely have to be more aware of speaking about people in ways that are not good. So back to the chapter. Not to act rashly, or to cling obstinately to one's opinion, not to believe everything people say, or to spread abroad the gossip one has heard, is great wisdom. As another thing, I'm a cradle Catholic, but I fell away from the faith, like many do, and delved into, Buddhist texts and Hindu texts and the New Age spirituality. And that's one thing that sticks out to me in this paragraph here is when I was delving into those texts and those ideas, I was very self-assured that I was right. And it struck my ego's fancy very, very much. And even in my dealings with people, looking back, I can find how judgmental I was, even in discussion, like with my parents, gave me the feeling of being able to say, like, well, they just don't understand. They don't know what I know. And so not very wise on my part. So take counsel with a wise and conscientious man. Seek the advice of your betters in preference to following your own inclinations. A good life makes a man wise according to God, and gives him experience in many things. For the more humble he is, and the more subject to God, the wiser and the more at peace he will be in all things. So, chapter number 5, reading the Holy Scripture. Truth, not eloquence, is to be sought in reading the Holy Scriptures, and every part must be read in the spirit in which it was written. For in the Scriptures we ought to seek profit rather than polished diction. Likewise, we ought to read simple and devout books as willingly as learned and profound ones. We ought not to be swayed by the authority of the writer, whether he be a great literary light or an insignificant person, but by the love of simple truth. We ought not to ask who is speaking, but mark what is said. Men pass away, but the truth of the Lord remains forever. God speaks to us in many ways without regard for persons. Our curiosity often impedes our reading of Scriptures. When we wish to understand and mull over what we ought simply to read and pass by. If you would profit from it, therefore, read with humility, simplicity, and faith, and never seek a reputation for being learned. Seek willingly and listen attentively to the words of the saints. Do not be displeased with the sayings of the ancients, for they were not made without purpose. That was one thing for me going back. I thought I didn't know much. I thought I was learning something new when I was reading the spiritual texts and the texts from different spiritual traditions. And like it says, read with humility and simplicity and faith. There wasn't much of either of those three things when I was reading. It was looking to gain. It was looking to add to. And that's what I hope I'm able to do with this text and going forward with the things that I read, is having the faith and humility and the simplicity to hopefully understand books such as the Imitation of Christ. And this part of the impetus for the name of this channel is Return to the Father. It's, like I said, I am a cradle Catholic, and I was handed a tradition that, through the years, whether it was just my unwilling ears or poor presentation, or a mix of both, I was handed something that was very wise and very robust, and I had no understanding of the material presented. So for me, it's a turning back around to that faith, to read it with new eyes, to try to understand it, so that I have a renewed mind and a renewed heart for God the Father. All right, last chapter, chapter 6, unbridled affections. When a man desires a thing too much, he at once becomes ill at ease. A proud and avaricious man never rests, whereas he who is poor and humble of heart lives in a world of peace. An unmortified man is quickly tempted and overcome in small, trifling evils, his spirit is weak. In a measure carnal and inclined to sensual things, he can hardly abstain from earthly desires. Hence it makes him sad to forego them. He is quick to anger if reproved. Yet if he satisfies his desires, remorse of conscience overwhelms him because he followed his passions, and they did not lead to the place he sought. True peace of heart, then, is found in resisting passions, not in satisfying them. There is no peace in the carnal man, in the man given to vain attractions, but there is peace in the fervent and spiritual man. So for me, again, going back to how I've lived my life, I was and still, to some measure, am this carnal man. And I seek pleasure and comfort in every area of life because I thought that was the goal. You go to school, you get a job, do the job, get paid well, have kids, married, then you retire, and then you enjoy life. Like everything is about the ends, the arrival to certain places. And once I got whatever level of success I found, once I got to the things that I wanted, or I always wanted more. Like it's never stopped. And so being in my 40s, being, let's say, halfway through life, hopefully, I'm trying to strive less and less. Now that doesn't mean like not work, but it's being more fervent in my relationship to God than my passions. And it's like I listened to Jonathan Pajot, who I'm a big fan of, and said like that's the trick of Christianity and he used Isaac as the example where he's asked to sacrifice his son, and he goes to do so, but God stops him. And Jonathan says you have to be willing to give up everything, your kids, your marriage, your job, so that it could be given back to you. Because God's not this selfish God, but he does want to commune with you. He does want to be in relationship with you. So that is what I'm striving to do here. And maybe that's even the wrong context to put it in, is I'm striving for it, but so I'll just leave that there. If you've listened to this, I thank you for listening. And tomorrow will be chapter 7, 8, and 9. And we'll continue with this little project.